So, did Jesus of Nazareth ever actually claim to be God? I mean, it's one of the biggest, most important questions in all of history. In this explainer, we're not going to mess around with opinions. We're going straight to the source material, the Gospels, to really dig into the textual evidence and see what he said about himself. Right, let's get straight to it. This one question is really the bedrock of Christianity. But the answer isn't as simple as a yes or no for a lot of people. So let's dig into the evidence together and see where it takes us. There's a pretty common idea out there, even held by some scholars, that Jesus never made a claim like that. The thinking goes that the whole divinity thing was invented later by his followers. But when you actually open up the Gospels, which are our primary sources, a very, very different story starts to take shape. So let's treat this like a historical investigation. Let's examine the evidence, piece by piece. Okay, our first body of evidence comes from the Gospel of John, and this is where we find some of the most direct and frankly jaw-dropping statements. We're going to zoom in on a very specific and powerful phrase, the I am statements. Here we go, Exhibit A, Piece 1. In the middle of a heated debate, Jesus just drops this line, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Now pay close attention to the grammar there. He doesn't say I was, which, would be correct. He says I am. That's a deliberate and really powerful choice of words. And the reaction from the crowd? It wasn't confusion. It was pure outrage. The text says they immediately picked up stones to execute him on the spot. This was no misunderstanding. They knew exactly what he was claiming, and in their minds, it was the worst crime imaginable. So why such an extreme reaction? The key is this Greek phrase he used, ego eimi. See, this is the exact phrase used in the Greek version of the Old Testament when God reveals his sacred name to Moses at the burning bush. So by using these specific words, Jesus was taking God's personal sacred name and applying it directly to himself. For everyone listening, this was an unmistakable, shocking claim to be the God of Israel. And this wasn't just a one-off slip of the tongue. John's gospel shows this is a consistent pattern. Jesus says things like, I and the Father are one, which, surprise, surprise, leads to another attempt to stone him. The text says he was making himself equal with God. He even claims he had glory with God before the world existed. And maybe the most telling part, when his disciple Thomas falls at his feet and says, my Lord and my God, Jesus doesn't stop him. He accepts it. All right, so let's turn to our next body of evidence. We're moving to the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Now here, the claims are a little more subtle, but they are just as powerful, and we find them hidden in plain sight in Jesus' absolute favorite title for himself, the Son of Man. Now when we hear Son of Man today, it might sound kind of humble, right? Like he's just saying he's a human being. But get this, Jesus uses this title for himself over 80 times. It was clearly central to how he saw himself. And for his audience back then, this phrase was anything but humble. It was a loaded term, pointing straight to a famous prophecy they all would have known. See, this title comes right out of the book of Daniel. In this incredible vision, a figure called the Son of Man comes down on the clouds of heaven, he approaches God himself, and he's given an eternal kingdom. And the text says all people will serve him, a word that's often translated as worship. This is clearly not just some guy, this is a divine figure. And Jesus takes this prophecy and applies it directly to himself at the most intense moment of his life, his own trial. The high priest asks him point blank, are you the Messiah? And Jesus says, I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. He's literally taking the key to scriptures from Daniel's vision, coming on the clouds, being in the position of ultimate authority and saying, yep, that's me. And just like we saw before, the reaction is instant. The high priest, the highest religious authority in the nation, tears his robes and screams, blasphemy! He got it. He understood perfectly. Jesus wasn't just claiming to be a Messiah, he was claiming to be the divine ruler from Daniel's cosmic vision. So here's the crucial takeaway. We don't really have to guess what Jesus meant by all this. The reactions of the people who were actually there, both his friends and his enemies, are maybe the most powerful evidence we have. They spoke the language, they knew the scriptures, they lived the culture, and they had absolutely no doubt about what he was claiming. I mean, just look at this pattern. It's undeniable. When Jesus claimed he and the Father were one, the charge was, you are making yourself God. When he used the divine name, I am, the immediate response was an attempt at execution.
When he identified himself as the divine Son of Man from Daniel's prophecy, the official verdict was blasphemy. Every single time a divine claim is met with a lethal response.
So, after looking at all this evidence, what can we say? Let's take a step back and try to pull together a conclusion based on what we found in the source material. Based on the texts themselves, the idea that Jesus never claimed to be divine is, well, it's pretty tough to defend. Whether it's the I am statements in John or the Son of Man title in the other Gospels, the message is consistent. And most importantly, the people who actually heard him say these things in person clearly understood them as claims to be God. And this evidence kind of presents us with a challenge. The writer, C.S. Lewis, famously argued that you can't just call Jesus a great moral teacher. Think about it. A normal person who said the things Jesus said wouldn't be a great teacher. They'd be a lunatic, on par with someone who thinks they're a poached egg. Lewis's point is that the claims are just too massive to find a comfortable middle ground. He really forces a choice. Was this man a liar, a lunatic, or exactly who he claimed to be?
And in the end, the Gospels bring it all right back to the very question that Jesus himself asked his followers. It's a question that the text seems to suggest is still being asked today. But who do you say that I am?